Welcome to Ben on Breaking News. I'm Ben Meiselas. This is your breaking news. The fake ceasefire between the United States and Iran once again exposed. The United States military hit the Bandar Abbas port city, striking various targets there, the airport there, in violation of the ceasefire. Iran responds a few hours later, striking the United States air base in Kuwait. While all of this is going on, where is Donald Trump? We're showing people right here on the video screen, Iran showing what its missiles looked like as the missiles were en route to Kuwait. Where is Donald Trump today? His official schedule says his entire day will be filled with executive time. He has nothing scheduled. His last post was like 15 hours ago. He may have made one post recently, which was just a repost, but it was of the an AI image of this reflecting pool that he's obsessed about, and he keeps talking about over and over again. Meanwhile, Axios, Barack Ravid, who's basically Donald Trump's chief stenographer at this point, in my opinion, posted this morning that the U.S. and Iran reached an agreement on a memorandum of understanding for a 60-day ceasefire extension and the launch of negotiations on Iran's nuclear program. But Trump has not yet given his final approval, says two senior U.S. officials and a regional source involved in the mediation told me. What the hell does that statement even make? I mean, we are literally seeing the war still raging on in the Middle East. And when you have that data, when you have PCE inflation today rose to 3.8%, it was obviously going to be a disastrous day on the market because it's a disastrous day for American consumers, but the market bears no relationship to what consumers are experiencing. Consumers experiencing the worst sentiment in the history of the consumer sentiment survey because the American people are suffering right now. The market got manipulated today. The NASDAQ soared, the S&P up, even the Dow was up today on this news that there was a peace deal in the works. But when you actually read the statement of Barack Ravid, and I'll show you Scott Jennings as well, who's a Trump sycophant puppet who was destroyed by Adam Mockler of the MeidasTouch network on CNN. After Ravid goes, U.S. and Iran reach deal, but need Trump's final approval, to U.S. officials and a regional source involved in the mediation efforts told me. And then Scott Jennings. I mean, doesn't this just expose this guy as a clown? This is why I love when Mockler debates this guy. I really do, and Mockler's incredible, an incredible debater. But like, I personally, for me, I don't see the utility of even having conversations with these psychopaths. Because here's what Jennings said here. Pull that back up, Jeremy. Scott Jennings. So it looks like a huge win for President Trump and the U.S. Hearing from a senior administration official, this report is true, and the U.S. appears to be getting everything we want. What's everything we want? The ability to commence negotiations about nuclear material in Iran in a 60-day period, and perhaps the Strait of Hormuz is open, but it's under Iranian and Oman control. That's everything. That's everything that you sold us. Everything we want, as y'all stated it, not what we wanted. We, the people, didn't want to be in a war in Iran. We, the people, do not support Donald Trump and the United States aiding and abetting genocide in Gaza, demolishing city blocks in Beirut and in Lebanon. We don't want the killing of innocent schoolgirls in Manab. We don't want any of it. We don't want this. The vast majority of Americans. But what you all said, what you wanted, which we didn't want, regime change. You pick your puppet like you're Delcy Rodriguez of Venezuela, but you get that in Iran. You control the Iranian oil. Iran's ballistic missile capabilities are fully destroyed. That's your objectives. And zero was achieved, and Iran took control over the Strait of Hormuz. So I don't know. What do you mean this is what you wanted? And I know that with all of the chaos that's taking place, whether it's the cover-up of child sex trafficking rings by this Trump regime or the demolishing of the White House and turning it into like this grotesque circusy looking thing, with the Trump story today about he wants to put his face on a $250 bill, and Don Jr. Helping this small defense company in North Carolina get a $650 million government loan, which increased the value of this company by $2 billion that Don Jr. invested in. And Don Jr. now has this private equity firm that's making billions of dollars. And, that $67 million from park fees has gone to these grotesque things that Donald Trump is doing around Washington, D.C., and the arch that's going to be blocking the arch that's going to be blocking Arlington Cemetery. I know all of these things can get overwhelming, and there's just so much so much to cover. But we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, cover all of this stuff, be able to call it out, and then connect it ultimately with the suffering of the American people. And they rely on us to just be so overwhelmed by all of this that we just kind of go, whatever, we don't want to deal with this. Politics is annoying. This isn't like a political thing. This is like a particularly fascist thing that they're doing. Politics, I understand why people don't like I don't like politics. I like people. I think politics is important for its consequences on people, but we need to come together to call out all of this despicable behavior each and every day and not lose sight of that. And that's what we're going to keep on doing here at the MeidasTouch network. And so you have the Trump regime saying that this was a great result. Then Iran claims there is no such deal. And then the Ayatollah Mojtaba puts out a statement and says, basically that, the sovereignty that we've obtained over the Strait of Hormuz is not going to ever be, impacted by any type of deal. It was interesting. I saw a statement from the Sultan of Oman about their strengthening ties with Iran right now. And it was fascinating because, they were the mediators back in February between the United States and Iran. They entered into an agreement in principle. They negotiated between the United States and Iran that the U.S. and Netanyahu violated when they invaded Iran. And so now Oman has moved closer to Iran. I think we're seeing a lot of other Arab nations move closer to Iran. I think the real thing holding Donald Trump back from further invading Iran, more than just the attacks that we're seeing, is I think a lot of the Arab nations are not letting him use the airspace, not letting them use their air bases behind the scenes. I think that's what's going on. You see Trump's desperation, right, when it comes to these Arab nations. And I don't believe we're being told the full picture. And I believe the full picture is that these Arab nations have basically drawn a red line and said, absolutely not. And I think, Donald Trump's lashing out and feels desperate. And that's why, we know what a sicko he is, but also the idea that he continues to say over and over again that Arab nations need to join the Abraham Accords. They need to become allies with Israel. In other words, if the United States is going to make peace with Iran, that Arab nations, you owe it to us, the United States, to become allies with Israel. To me, it just reeks of this utter desperation. And as we see more leaking to the press that a deal has been done with Iran that we know isn't, to manipulate the markets, as we see, where is Donald Trump today? Where and this also suspiciously comes after that visit to Walter Reed, where he said he was getting dental work, and he said he had a perfect visit, a perfect checkup. And of course, they don't release any of the tests. They don't release any of the exams. They don't release anything. I think that there's real desperation taking place, and there's a real sense of being, trapped. And for Trump, and for Treasury Secretary Bessent, who oddly filled in and did the press conference today at the White House. And Bessent also said he didn't know where Trump was, which I found odd. I mean, the tool that they have, I guess, is to keep on sanctioning Iran. But when you remove sanctions from Russia and allow Russia to sell its oil, Russia is also supporting Iran. And when you show that kind of weakness to China, China's also helping Iran, and China's becoming kind of the organizing principle right now in the Middle East. And so I want our audience to pay attention to the broader trends of what's happening. which may not show up in 24 hours or 48 hours, but it will show up in 5, 10 years, or perhaps even sooner than that, which is a new security architecture in the Middle East is actually being created. I mean, while Donald Trump is posting AI images of reflecting pools and arches and golden ballrooms and East Wing stuff and Club Rose Garden, and what's the new one today? He wants to coat the horses in Washington, D.C. with another coat of gold. This is what Notice. The Notice does a great job reporting. Shout out to Notice. Trump administration is paying millions of dollars to quickly cover 4 enormous bronze horses with extra thick 23.75 karat gold leaf. It's like the American people are like, what? Well, can we just get health care? Can we just get housing affordable? Like, can we don't want UFC stadiums in front of the White House. I mean, just look at that. Look at that. It's a grotesque thing that we see. But as Donald Trump's doing all of that stuff, you realize that a whole new security architecture in the Middle East and the world is being built. And it's why corporate news doesn't cover it. Or if they do, maybe it's like a quick headline. But every morning I talk about what's going on in the world, and I have the series, whether it's Furious World Leaders, I call it. And so you all see, I usually do that 5:30 Pacific time where I talk about these major developments, and I focus on it from all angles. Like this morning, I talked about North Korea announcing that it's never going to denuclearize, that it continues to launch these ballistic missile tests, and it continues to show these photos of Kim Jong-un and nuclear weapons, and we're a nuclear power. We're never going to denuclearize. We're going to keep building our nuclear arsenal. And I just reflect back when former President Obama was in office, and all of the news stories would try to focus on like, oh, Obama's weak because he's allowing Kim Jong-un to do these nuclear tests or do these ballistic missile tests, not nuclear tests, do these ballistic missile tests. And that was like a narrative, like that it's Obama's fault that Kim Jong-un was doing ballistic missile or cruise missile tests. Like, dude, Kim Jong-un does cruise missile and ballistic missile tests every damn day. Remember the biggest, and now he's like, yeah, I got nuclear weapons. I ain't leaving my nuclear weapons. That used to be in normal political, normal human, normal America times. That would be a big story. Have any other than on the MeidasTouch network? Have you heard about it on any TV that he just keeps doing these tests and saying we're not denuclearizing? Yesterday, he talked about autonomous nuclear weapons. Kim Jong-un did AI nuclear weapons, and no response from our Defense Department, no response from the State Department, no response at all, and it gets very little coverage. Remember, under former President Biden, the big story was, wow, these weather balloons were over, these white weather balloons, and look how weak Biden is because of the weather balloons. That was like the biggest story. Remember Marjorie Taylor Greene, when she was still like ultra MAGA, she dressed up to Biden's State of the Union as a weather balloon, and she like, I remember that photo of her, where they look how weak he is, weather balloons. And then it turned out that under Trump's first term, there was all these weather balloons. They just covered it all up. They covered up everything. And I think more attention needed to be paid back then. MeidasTouch really wasn't around, but we were just starting back then. But all of the cover-ups in the Trump regime, number one, many of them remained covered up, and I reflect on them a lot as well. Like, remember when Trump killed Soleimani, the Iranian IRGC general, back in January of 2020. Remember that? That was like the first instance of that new year. And then we started to learn about COVID, which we should have learned about months before, but that was being covered up by the Trump regime as well. But we started hearing about it, finally right after Soleimani. Remember, Iran retaliated in 2020 by striking a U.S. base in Iraq. And then there were dozens of U.S. soldiers who suffered traumatic injuries, traumatic brain injuries, but the Trump regime claimed that it was just headaches. And then they refused to acknowledge that anybody was injured. They literally covered up the whole thing and said, yeah, there was never serious. These were real serious injuries that took place back then. And to me, I just reflect on Trump's behavior right now when Trump says, we control the Strait of Hormuz, everything's fine, they claim there's only 400 and not only, but they claim 469 of our troops have been injured or so. 470 of our troops were injured in Donald Trump's catastrophic war in Iran. But my general rule of thumb with Donald Trump is you either kind of, multiply by 20 to 50, or you divide by 20 to 50, depending on if he wants to downplay something or if he wants to increase something. So if Donald Trump says that he brought in $18 trillion, I think that's 18 times more than what he really brought in. And maybe the U.S. brought in $1 trillion in investment, consistent with past years, $1.5 trillion. It's still good. We're not, not quite as good as what Biden did, but 18 trillion. So you always have to add a fraud multiple of everything Trump did, right? Just like those the fraud case where Trump was found civilly liable for fraud. There was a criminal case against Trump. The guy cooks his books. Like, that's what he's known for doing. So to me personally, I'm giving you my opinion. If I hear 469 people were injured, I believe the number, and I'm not trying to get conspiratorial. I don't know the number. I'll be very clear. But knowing my rule of thumb when it comes to Trump fraud, I think that number is probably closer to 3,000 to 5,000, because he lies about everything. He picks an odd number, 469, 472, or whatever it is. And then it's like, maybe that number is accurate. No, he lies about everything. But I was notable because there was the reporting in the past 24 hours that when Donald Trump was at Walter Reed for that very suspicious medical checkup that he claimed he got, where he said it was perfect, there were 14 U.S. troops who were injured in the Iran war who were there, who said that Donald Trump snubbed them, that specifically Donald Trump didn't want to be near them because it would bring attention to the consequences of the war. It's what CBS reported, and others were reporting as well. So he refused to meet with the troops who were injured in this catastrophic war in Iran. And to me, again, there's just so many things that this guy does that's absolutely disqualifying. And that's right at the top of it, which, I apologize, I went on a tangent there, but it brings me back to, as I was saying, this, security architecture, because other countries are observing, how does Donald Trump even treat his own troops, yet alone how does he treat allies, right? Donald Trump has done everything he can to alienate allies. He's attacked Canada, 51st state. He constantly attacks NATO. He says he's withdrawing resources, massive amounts of resources for NATO. He says that the Article 5 guarantees aren't something that he thinks that America really needs to follow, or he's not sure if he would follow Article 5. The moment the president of the United States wavers on Article 5, Article 5 is rendered meaningless, right? Because what's the point of Article 5? It's supposed to create a certainty of mutual defense. And where the entity, the United States, that's supposed to be the leader of NATO, equivocates even a little bit on Article 5, there is no Article 5. It doesn't have the meaning because it doesn't have a deterrent effect anymore. You say, of course, like if you look at Xi Jinping's statements, there are red lines that they draw. If you look at the Iranian negotiators, they draw certain red lines and they don't budge from that. And if they do budge from it, they don't ever mention publicly that they budge from it, because if you mention publicly that a red line isn't really a red line, then nobody takes you seriously. You look clownish. So even if you're actually going to veer off of the red line, there's a way you have to conduct yourself publicly in diplomacy. And one of the most important things is Article 5 of NATO. And so when Donald Trump says publicly, that NATO is not reliable, should we even be a part of it? I don't know if Article 5 is something I'll abide by. Sure, you could have our military people, say, well, Article 5 is still sacrosanct. You can still have, NATO's supreme commanders and other top people say, yeah, Article 5. They may say the right things, but the moment Trump demeans it, it's like going into the finals. Like, could you imagine if the coach of the New York Knicks says, yeah, I don't think the Knicks are, I'm not sure my team's going to do, is going to do that great. Could you, I'm not really, I don't really know if they're going to be okay. or a leader of an organization. I mean, Jensen Huang, could you imagine if he said regarding NVIDIA, yeah, not really sure what's going to happen with these semiconductor chips next car. Boom, it would crash, right? I mean, it would crash right away. And so Donald Trump saying that NATO is not something that he thinks is, or calling NATO a paper tiger, is the biggest cell phone, because you're calling yourself a paper tiger because you're supposed to be the leader of NATO. America's supposed to lead. This is your team. So you're telling your team that, that your team is a paper tiger, and the rest of the world sees that you're telling on yourself as a paper tiger, and that you can't be relied on for anything. And the thing with Trump too, it's like, okay, man, honestly, it's like, to me, you leaving NATO would be treasonous and traitorous and disgusting, but just stop the shit talking, man. Do it. If that's what you want to do, then just do it. Shut up. Like, stop the freaking whining. I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna try to get me. No, just get out, man. Then get out. Shut up. It's the whole thing with all these MAGA people. Just if that's how you truly feel, if your worldview is that you think NATO is a paper tiger and that it's meaningless, stop troll. Like, you're not supposed to be a troll. You're supposed to be the leader of the United States. And if you honestly think that this is not in the interest, then you're the leader. Unfortunately, you're the leader. And hopefully there's an election that holds him accountable, not because of politics, but because we need to hold fascists accountable. In my opinion, that's what we need to do. But it's like, what are you going to do? Make a decision. Stop. You look so weak. Okay, you don't like NATO, then don't do it. You don't want to help Ukraine? Don't do it. Stop teasing it. Oh, I'll give you a missile, but you got to say please. You got to say you like me. You want to see my perfume that I've got in the Oval Office? It's like, if you want to see the disastrous consequences of your action, take accountability and do it. But it's this constant should I do it? Should I not do it? Should I do it? Should I not do it? Should I do a deal? Should I do a deal? I'm not going to do a deal. I'm not going to do a deal. And to me, let's forget about the politics here. Let's just talk about the leadership aspect of it. It's just weak. It's just really, really, really weak behavior. So as I noted, you have the security architecture change, and you've got Canada holding a meeting with Sweden at the main CanSec, which is the big Canadian security conference. Canada announcing that it's going to be purchasing the Global Eye, which is like that AWACS, the big kind of crown jewel military plane detection, right? The U.S. had the E7, which was the successor to the E3 AWAC, and Canada said, no, we have Bombardier that works very well with Saab, which does the Global Eye. We're gonna go with Sweden. We're seeing France assert its nuclear umbrella throughout Europe and offering protection to Poland, Norway, and Lithuania, and lots of other countries, UK and France, saying, okay, we're not going to forbear on increasing our nuclear deterrent. As I mentioned, you have Kim Jong-un on the other side of things, bragging about the nukes that they have. Last week, you had Russia, Putin speaking in Belarus about their nuclear weapons. And so you have in totality a much more chaotic world right now, where a new security architecture is being designed, where I think ultimately China replaces the United States in the Middle East and other areas. Sure, the U.S. is still a large economy. It's still big. It's certainly, I don't think, going to fade and not become a major power in terms of multi-power worlds. But we see the formation, right? On the one hand, you have kind of U.S., America first, America alone. Separately, you have the BRICS, which you have Russia, you have China, you have North Korea, you have Iran, you have that. Separately, you have this kind of mid-power alliance that's now forming, which that's how they refer to themselves, as kind of these mid powers, which is like, Canada and France and Germany. I mean, Poland right now, we're seeing lots of economic growth out of Poland, the Nordic countries, the EU, coming together. And then if you're Japan or South Korea, I should mention Australia kind of joining this kind of mid-power structure. Then if you're Japan and you're South Korea and you're, the Southeast Asian countries, you have to think, I need a deterrent against China. The US is not reliable. We see what they're doing. We can't totally get out right now because we have so much invested with the United States in terms of this relationship. Unfortunately, we trusted them, but they're going to move more towards the mid powers where they're able to. They'll try to coexist more with China. And to me, that's your kind of multipolar world that we have, and the acceleration of that. It's possible that may have happened in 20 years, no matter what, but that's where we are right now. And, it doesn't help the United States when Donald Trump is holding these cabinet meetings and he's, doing things like, again, telling the Arab nations, you have to join with Israel. You have to become if you want America to do peace with Iran, you need to become an ally with Israel. To which, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan and Turkey and all these countries, why would we do that? What does it have to do with anything? And also, that's not the way you talk to allies. You don't dictate terms that we have to enter into security alliances with anyone, yet alone Israel. And they've made clear, once there's a two-state solution, when there's Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital, and Israel recognizes that, whereas now Netanyahu's bragging, oh, I got 70% of Gaza, and we're going to escalate in Lebanon and Tyre, this ancient city of Tyre, about 170,000, 200,000 people in Arabic. They call it Sir, but it's Tyre, Tyre, or Sir is how they say it in Arabic, evacuated and demolished. I mean, we're seeing, one of Iran's critical points in the deal is that security guarantees apply to Lebanon, and Israel saying, well, look, our national security interest means we have to go after Hezbollah. But in doing that, they're demolishing, again, Lebanon, and you see all of the innocent people being killed. And you see that in Beirut, you see that in Tyre, you see that going on, you see medics being killed, of course, the genocide in Gaza, you see all of this taking place. And, and going back to before the kind of fraud and the lies of the Trump regime, and, is saying, there's a ceasefire in Gaza. What are you talking about? I solved 10 wars, ceasefire in Gaza. Everything's good. No, it's not. No, it's not. And I guess that works on Fox. I guess that works on state regime media. But the rest of the world sees what's going on. Smart people see what's going on. You all who watch, smart people like you all see what's going on. So here's Trump at this cabinet meeting. This is the last time we heard him speak. And here he is talking about how these Arab nations owe us. We would like to have countries join the Abraham Accords. In fact, I'm going to make it mandatory. Here's what he said. Let's play it.
And we'd like to have the countries we were talking about, with Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and the others, we'd like to have them immediately join and Steve Witkoff is working on that with Jared and some others, but would like to have them join the Abraham Accords. It'll be historic if they do it. And I think they owe that to us, to be honest. I think, because that really would be a tremendous sign. And I think those countries owe it to us.
Why would they owe it to you? You went to war in Iran with Netanyahu. You screwed those countries badly. They did quid pro quos with you personally, did all of these business deals with you. What do they owe you? They owe you an alliance with Israel. And by you saying that also, which, is obviously your intention, how is that furthering anything? I mean, most people believe, and I believe rightfully so, that the US was dragged into a war in Iran because of Israel. And I don't think that helps Israel either, frankly. I mean, I don't think that helps any public sentiment or interest or anything regarding Israel. But and I think Netanyahu is a curse and cancer on Israel as well, like he is on the rest of the world. But now claiming that the only way out is now the Arab nations have to become allied with Israel. So you go in because of it, and then the way out is because of it. And then Arab nations are like, okay, got it. We're done with you. We're done with you. It's hard for us to fully extract ourselves right now, but we know that this is over. We know that the breakup has officially occurred. And now we will, ease out of it because so much of our security apparatus is entangled now with your bases here. But we're moving on. That's what you're seeing. And then the way he so cavalierly talks about bombing Oman. Here's what he says about Oman. Let's play this clip.
Interesting reading for people.
On the Strait of Hormuz, Mr. President, Iran wants control of the Strait of Hormuz. Would you accept a short-term deal that allows Iran and Oman to control the strait? And would they have to open it immediately, or would you be open to that happening over a period of time?
No, the strait's going to be open to everybody.
And who would control
It's
it?
international waters. Nobody's going to control it. We're going to watch over it. We'll watch over it, but nobody's going to control it. That's part of the negotiation that we have. They would like to control it. Nobody's going to control it. It's international waters, and Oman will behave just like everybody else, so we'll have to blow them up. They understand that. They'll be fine.
Or else we'll have to blow them up. And again, those two clips are devastating for the United States. Absolutely devastating. It won't be talked about like that in corporate news, and maybe it's just Donald Trump saying Donald Trump stuff. But no, what he did to the Arab nations there and what he said and what he's demanding that they do with Israel, when if you know about the histories of these nations, they're not doing that. It's not like, is it a chance? No, it's a 0% chance. It's a -% chance of this happening. It will not happen, period, full stop. If it does happen, these Arab nations will have their monarchies toppled the very next day. It ain't happening. And then to basically say to a country that largely plays the role of mediator and neutral, we're going to blow you up. And Amman, their foreign minister, has a lot of strong relations in the region. Everybody sees what's going on. And they see that and they go, So that brings us to where the episode started. So what does Donald Trump do? He does kind of the weak move. Which rather than do the deal, which he should do a deal with Iran. And you're going to have to make concessions to Iran because you lost the war. You're going to have to do. You lost the war. You didn't win the war. You shouldn't have been in the war in the first place. Make your concessions, get out, and try to save face as best possible. That's what you do when you lose sometimes. But he doesn't do that. He doesn't want to escalate further, which, let me be very clear, he should not escalate. But, while he looks up to authoritarian strongmen like Putin, Trump doesn't have that. He's actually scared. Like, he's actually scared of doing it. And by the way, he should be. But he talks tough and then the actions don't back it up. So what does he do? I've said this before. He's a sucker puncher. Right? What are scumbag things to do? Like people who break promises, right? Lie. And like the biggest scumbag move is like a sucker puncher, right? Like you're walking and then boom, you get sucker punched in the back. Like, you just sucker punch me? Trump uses negotiations to be a sucker puncher. And so the move is, all right, I'm too afraid to escalate further. I'm also too afraid to make the deal, which you should do. So here what we're gonna do. Let's kill a fishing boat. Let's just kill two people and go, look, let's kill this person. Let's kill this boat. Let's kill two fast boats. And then let's see how they respond. Ooh, right? And so that's what he does in Bandar Abbas. That's what that was. That move was desperation, is what it was, in my opinion. And then what else is he doing? Southcom announces, we got another fishing boat in the Pacific, more fishing boats that were destroyed. And then Trump's moved on to what we've slaughtered like 300 people in fishing boats without due process, war crimes, sickening. Again, and it doesn't even get attention either. Another one happened yesterday. Another one happened the day before. About 300 people slaughtered by the United States without due process on fishing boats. And from a lot of the stories we know, a lot of them are just fishing boats. They were not drug dealers. And even if they were drug dealers, they get due process. You don't just kill people. We don't go around killing. We don't go around murdering and killing people. We don't even hear any of these stories. What did you find on the boat? What did you recover? Did you recover fentanyl? Did you recover bombs? I knew you call people narco terrorists, but what'd you do? And so as the Trump regime's weaker than ever, also, what else are they doing? Like, Trump entered into a secret deal with Guatemala to do strikes in Guatemala. They're doing strikes in Ecuador. What they want to do is they want to increase their presence to do strikes all in Latin America, because eventually they want to ramp up their strikes in Mexico. That's Trump's golden prize, is to start bombing Mexico. Trust me, he wants to bomb the hell out of Mexico. And Claudia Sheinbaum, who started off strong and then started appeasing him, to me, she's fallen while Prime Minister Carney has risen. It was interesting, kind of the dynamic there, how I've seen, her doing her whole sovereignty, yes, diplomacy, no. And it's like, all right, he's walking all over Mexico right now. It's so obvious. And then he blockades Cuba. And now they go to Axios also, like they went to Axios with the other story. And then they say, this Axios reports, the Trump administration is bracing for potential collapse of Cuba's totalitarian government as early as this summer. And they've war gamed new military response plans in case the island descends into chaos. By the way, this is part of the Trump regime's war plan, in my opinion, which is to utilize Axios and outlets like that to sow chaos and disorder and hope that the sheer force of the propaganda is enough to bring down regimes. In Iran, it wasn't able to. In Venezuela, there was really no fighting back in Venezuela. And Trump just hoisted up another authoritarian there with Delcy. But they're hoping to use this propaganda to get the Cuban people to rise up against the regime. That's their goal. But doing that, they want to commit, again, crimes against humanity on the Cuban people, starve them to death. And the thinking is, if we starve the Cubans to death, they're going to blame the Cuban regime versus the United States for starving them to death. And I believe we shouldn't starve you. If we dislike a regime, we shouldn't starve the people of the regime to death, number one. And I think tactically and strategically, it backfires as well. And it brings people closer in solidarity with each other and says, you're starving us to death. We know that we're not stupid. We know what you're doing to us. We know what you're trying to do. And, and that's what I think is going on there. All right. We got a lot to discuss still. I know we covered a lot of material there. A reminder, hit subscribe, help us get to 7 million subscribers. Subscribe to the MeidasTouch on audio as well. And if you can, subscribe to our Substack. All right, let's take our first and only quick break of the show. We'll be right back.
America's family farms are in trouble. Foreign entities and corporate conglomerates control the majority of America's meat industry, hijacking your dinner table and crushing our family farms. So what can we do about this? Let me tell you about a company that's coming up swinging on behalf of American family farms and your family's food security. Moink. That's moo plus oink. They offer grass-fed and grass-finished beef and lamb, pastured pork and chicken, born, raised, and harvested right here in the United States of America from real American family farms. Bacon don't lie, folks, and the Moink difference is a difference you can taste. Moink is the real deal. I love it, and you will too. Join the Moink movement today. Here, I'll make it easy for you to get started. I've asked them to give you their flavor-bursting, meaty chicken wings free for a year. Go to moinkbox.com/MeidasTouch right now and get your free chicken wings in every paid box. Enjoy the highest quality meat and take a stand for the American family farms. Spelled MOINK box.com/MeidasTouch. MEIDASTOUCH. That's moinkbox.com/MeidasTouch. All right, let me tell you something that's been bugging me for a while. I can't be the only one who's left a doctor's appointment thinking, what did I actually just learn? You go in, you try to ask questions, and you walk out with, you're fine, or drink more water. No real data, no plan, nothing actionable. I've had that happen more times than I can count, and it's frustrating because you actually want to take control over your health. That's why I've been so fascinated by what Superpower is doing. They basically flip the whole system. Superpower sends a licensed professional to your home, or you could go to a nearby lab lab, and it's one simple blood draw. But here's the difference. They test over 100 biomarkers, way more than a typical checkup. And it gives you a real detailed understanding of what's going on inside your body. I'm talking heart, liver, thyroid, hormones, metabolism, vitamin levels, even environmental toxins. So whether you're trying to prevent disease, fix brain fog, or just optimize your workouts, this gives you real answers. Because honestly, most of us are just guessing. What supplements should I take? Am I sleeping enough? Is my diet even right? Superpower actually gives you an actionable health plan based on your results. They even suggest supplements or prescriptions you could buy directly through them, plus nutrition guidance and lifestyle changes. And this part is wild. You get your true biological age, and you could track it over time. So it's not just a one-time snapshot. Every test builds on the last, so you could actually see progress year after year instead of starting from scratch every January. They also have an on-demand clinician team, so you're not stuck waiting weeks for answers or Googling things at 2 a.m. And get this, Superpower used to cost $499, but right now it's just $199 for the full experience. That's honestly cheaper than most of the other services out there that sometimes charge $500, $1,000, and often more. So if you're serious about actually understanding your health this year, this is a no-brainer. Make this the year you stop guessing about your health with Superpower. Not only did Superpower reduce their price to just $199, but for a limited time, our listeners get an additional $20 off with code Meidas. Head to superpower.com and use code Meidas at checkout for $20 off your membership. That's MEIDAS. After you sign up, they'll ask how you heard about them, so make sure to mention this podcast to support the show.
Welcome back to Ben on Breaking News. Shout out to my brothers right there. Great ad reads. Those sponsors help support this show. And Jordy and Brett work with those sponsors to get you some of the best discounts out there. So the discount codes are in the description below. Check them out. All right. I want to chat about what's going on here in the United States. And I had the opportunity to interview recently James Tallarico and Zoran Mamdani on the same day. And it was a very enlightening interview to speak with people who are actually talking about issues that matter to the American people. I mean, they're talking about housing affordability. They're talking about consequences for slum landlords. They're talking about helping people with their health care. They're talking about better education, talking about jobs, talking about concrete plans. And so it's just fascinating. You take a look at this Texas Senate race, for example. And on the one hand, you have this Democratic candidate, James Tallarico, empathetic, nice, 8th-generation Texan, seems like a great candidate. I think he's a great candidate. He's out there talking about issues that matter. On the other hand, you have Ken Paxton, who's been impeached by his own party. Whistleblowers who worked for him, who are Republicans, called him out for engaging in this horrific behavior with a guy who then went to prison where they were doing quid pro quos to get a job for Paxton's mistress so that they could hide it together. And then, Paxton was under indictment for securities fraud and mortgage fraud and all of these, objectively, there was some of the most, horrific things. You couldn't have a bigger contrast between Tallarico and Paxton. Donald Trump endorsed Paxton. Paxton beats John Cornyn, the Republican senator from Texas, who did a lot for Republicans. I mean, you may not like Cornyn. I don't like Cornyn. He's better than Paxton. And he's done a lot objectively for Texas and Republicans in Texas, whether, I'm not suggesting he's a good guy by any stretch of the imagination, but here's a guy who's been a loyal Republican kind of foot soldier, in this current MAGA world, he's not Mar-a-Lago sycophant enough for Donald Trump. So it's just here. It's like, here we go. This sums up the country for me right now, right? On the one hand, you've got people like Tallarico, Mamdani, and others who are proposing solutions, rolling up their sleeves, talking about issues. Do you have to agree with everything they say? No. Are they striving to look at what's worked and what's not worked and how do we improve it? Certainly what's happening now ain't working. We all agree with that. And so they're out there talking about issues. On the other hand, you have this Republican MAGA party that's doing like name calling. He's Talafrico. He's Tofu Talarico. He's tofu. He's a transgender. What do you mean he's a transgender? What are you talking about? You just want to bully the transgender community? He's not a vegan. Nothing wrong if he was a vegan. He's not a vegan. A tofu, you're calling him tofu. He's 6 genders. He's 6 genders, everybody. He's the most radical guy around. Talarico's the most radical. I don't know. I think radical, maybe the people who are covering up child sex trafficking rings, who are out there building golden ballrooms, sending $1.8 billion slush funds to insurrectionists. I mean, that's pretty freaking radical to me. The guy who's like, hey, let's help Americans get health care. Let's help Americans get better jobs. Let's, make sure we deal with these data centers that are ruining communities, and AI, which is taking people. So what's radical? So this is the dynamic that we deal with, I think, in our country. It's perfectly laid out here. Can Americans elect people who actually align with their interests, or is the pull of propaganda and name calling and divisiveness and whatever, is it so strong, $1 trillion of media pumped into these stuff that, Americans go, oh, I guess he's tofu. I guess he's a vegan. I guess he's transgender. Well, I guess so. I'm Texas. I can't vote for that. I can't vote for that. I mean, is that, and just think about the power of propaganda right here. It's being used as the main tool in wars right now, right? In Iran, Trump's main tool is the propaganda, is the manipulation of the media. Trump harnesses that MAGA media machine of lies and then just pushes it on a country nonstop. California Governor Gavin Newsom saw it in January 2025 with the wildfires. Newsom likes smelt fish. He wanted to do the smelt. The most outrageous thing you say over and over and over again, that starts becoming you bend reality, and you pick a thing that's so far out there, that's such a lie, that people believe it when you keep on saying it over and over again, because who would lie about these things? He's not turning on the faucet. It's a faucet. You got to turn it on. You drained all of the reservoirs. You got to, it's all Newsom's fault. And, most humans who go into governance for governing are like, well, I'm not going to respond to that. I got to do my job. I can't deal. I got to focus. I have to respond to smelt and calling me tofu talarico, and I got to respond to, that I'm being attacked in a way that's also horribly, insensitive to the transgender community. But I got to say, no, that's not true. I mean, like, I have to live in this world. And I think one of the things you see is that in 2026, with the level of propaganda's reach with social media, all this, you have to have a plan to push back forcefully and immediately and rapidly every single damn day against this relentless propaganda machine. So this right here is the RNC chair, Joe Gruters. When he's asked about Talarico, here's what he says. Here, play this clip.
Because Talafrico is a creep, and he thinks he's a vegan. He thinks God is non-binary. He wants to mutilate children. He wants to put boys in girls' locker rooms. People are done with that. That's, if you looked at the autopsy the Democrats put out, it's simple. All those things, and the fact that they are openly supporting communists and socialists. People don't want the United States Senate. Certainly the voters in Texas don't want that. We think Paxton will win. We think it's a red seat. Hands down, we're not going to have any issues heading into November. We're happy with Paxton, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure he's successful.
Well, you don't talk about any issues. You don't talk about housing, affordability, healthcare, anything that's actually impacting the American people. But you just went through your whole list. That's their entire campaign. Freako, transgender, socialism, communism, multiple genders, and that's what they do. And then they just spew that over. He's a creep. I don't know. I mean, that dude looked in the mirror. That dude looks like a pretty creepy dude right there. That guy. I mean, like, you have guys like that and Stephen Chung out there. They're the ones calling other people like creeps. I mean, you may want to look in the mirror and take a look at yourself, and you like whatever. And we'll leave it there. So you have that, and then on the other hand, you have James Tallarico, and James Tallarico said the following to me about Ken Paxton. Let's play this clip.
Ken Paxton embodies everything that's wrong with our political system. He was impeached by his own party for using his public office to enrich himself and his donors at our expense. And that kind of corruption is the rot at the core of this broken system. It's why we can't afford anything. It's why we can't get ahead no matter how hard we work, because billionaires buy these politicians like Ken Paxton, and then these puppet politicians turn around and rig the rules of the game in favor of the billionaires at our expense. And so this has been happening for 50 years in this country. Mega donors and their puppet politicians have been stealing from the American people, from the people of Texas, stealing the wealth that we created through their bribes, their bailouts, and their billionaire tax breaks. And so I look forward to not only running against Ken Paxton, but running against the broken system that he embodies.
Then you have Benny Johnson, right-wing MAGA influencer. And there's lots of rumors that swirl around this guy. Lots of rumors that swirl around this guy. Just leave it at that. And here's what he had to say. Let's play this clip.
But we're stuck with James Tallarico, and I'm no political consultant, Jesse, but here's 3 things you could ask him to defeat him on a debate stage. He says there's 6 genders. Well, why don't you name them? You say you have a girlfriend. Why don't you name her? And you say that Jesus is pro-abortion. So how do you square that with thou shalt not kill? The 10 Commandments, something I'm pretty sure that Jesus wanted you to uphold. So, once again, the reason why Democrats are failing is because they've given up on masculinity. They've given up on testosterone. They've given up entirely for effeminate, estrogenic, catty, and totally embarrassing candidates like Beto and Beta here. And most importantly, the American people know what leadership looks like. It looks like President Trump winning.
Seriously? You're talking about testosterone? You're talking about beta? It's coming from you? Really? Really? Benny Johnson? For real? And again, notice what he says. Here's how if you want to win the election, here's how you do it in 3. Ask him about gender. Ask him who his girlfriend is. Okay. And then you can ask him, it's like, what are you even talking? How? And by the way, if you want to go down that line of questioning, and if those are the issues that are important to you, then don't complain when your electricity bills go up 30%, when the gas prices go up 70%, when your groceries go up 30%, 40%, when everything in your life becomes utterly unaffordable, when the American dream gets destroyed. Know that these individuals like Benny Johnson and Gruters and others, they're the mercenaries for the oligarchy. And they're out there running blocking and tackle, trying to pit people against each other so that their interests are not being aligned with the politicians, but that they go, oh my God, he's tofu. I can't vote for tofu guy. Okay, well, then you're going to vote for your life sucks guy. Okay. You're going to vote for the fact that things are never going to get better for you because you are supporting candidates who hate you. And it's just that simple. And they're the way they go after Mamdani. Zoran Mamdani, he wants to transfer wealth from the landlords to the community. Like, people love Mamdani in New York right now. He's rolling up his sleeves and trying to create solutions to make it a more affordable place. He's actually doing it. And he's very popular in New York. And so I show you how the Republicans are communicating. Here's what Mamdani told me. Let's play the clip. You know, I see the Trump regime now also bragging about kicking people off of SNAP, kicking people off of Medicaid. Their big announcement also, the housing and urban development will be stopping emotional support dogs. Yeah, no emotional support dog. That's what they're considering their dubs. That's their wins right there. And so it's using government to harm people, to take away. Whereas I think you're showing a model that works in New York City and nationwide. Can you talk to New York City being a model for government working?
You know, wherever you live in this country, people come with an anxiety about the first of the month because they don't know if they're going to be able to afford their rent. That is not just a New York City specific problem. It is one that people feel coast to coast and everywhere in between. And this is a vision for a city where we make it easier for people to actually afford to live here. Make it easier for people to afford not only an apartment that they may rent, but even dreaming of becoming a homeowner. And so much of what you're speaking about when it comes to federal policy, it's completely divorced from what any New Yorker is actually worried about. What people are worried about is what we're actually acting on, which is how to make this city affordable and how to actually ensure that housing isn't some imaginary dream or fantasy that people have that they could one day afford, but it's a reality. And the way we do that is by putting the full financial muscle of the city behind that kind of a vision. We're incredibly excited to be doing that today.
Look, you got to stay on message like that, and you got to deliver. You got to deliver. And I just find it fascinating too. You know, state regime media, what do they want to talk about today? May 28th, 2026. What do they want to talk about? Biden's debate, Biden this, Biden that. So they have Democratic Senator Coons on, and they said, so what do you make of Dr. Jill Biden saying that she was very worried about when Biden was doing his debate? Watch Coons' response right here. Let's play it.
She thought he was having a stroke. It's inexplicable
Martha,
as a wife
look,
why you wouldn't stop the whole thing right then and go straight to a hospital. What's your take on what she's saying now?
Frankly, my take is that as I've gone up and down the state of Delaware in the last couple of days, nobody's asked me about Joe Biden's debate performance in 2024. They've asked me about the rising price of gas. They've asked me about Trump's tariffs. They've asked me about insecurity and instability because of an unresolved war in Iran that is not going well. As someone who cares for President Biden, I too was concerned about what that several second pause meant, what was happening at the moment. But I was with President Biden earlier today. We were at the funeral of a friend of ours, someone who long served as the mayor of Wilmington, and he's fine. I see regular incidents where President Trump falls asleep in meetings in the middle of the day, makes no sense in answering questions. And frankly, what I think the average Delawarean wants to hear is what are we going to do to lower their costs? And what are we going to do to avoid future pointless wars overseas? Two things President Trump ran on when he was successfully elected in 2024.
Well, I mean, we can go back and forth, you know, on the cognitive abilities of President Trump versus what was quite obvious from President Biden. President Trump answers like 30 to 100 questions every single day from the press.
Answers 30 bajillion questions a day. Yeah, he answers them horribly. He's not speaking in sentences. He's not staying awake during the day, any day. And it's impacting critical decision making. We see how it's impacting critical decision making. He's lashing out at reporters, calling them piggy, and screaming at reporters and saying horrible things, to them as he has this disinhibition. We see him before our eyes with the hands and the neck and this and that. And again, more significantly, how it's impacting the people's lives. You want to talk about 2024 Biden, Joe Biden? No, the American people don't want to talk about that. American people don't want. American people say, we're in 2026. What are you doing right now to make my life better? What are you doing? What are your plans? What are your policies? You promised these were promises things would be cheaper on day one. The war in Ukraine would be resolved on day one. Electricity costs would be down 50%. Gas prices would be under $2. These were promises. I guarantee you I'll be able to do it. I'll be able to do it. And none of it's happened. None of it. Things are worse. PCE inflation, 3.8% today. Inflation is back in a major way. I believe that we'll be at 5% inflation PCE by the end of this year. I think it's about a 0.2 to 0.3 increase every month. So just do the math. If we're at 3.8%, if next month it's another 0.2, that gets us to 4. And we've got about 4 or 5 more months left. That gets us to 5% pretty quickly by the end of that. I don't have to be a great economist to see where this is heading. Personal savings rate now at 2.6%, the worst since 2022, right after COVID. Last year it was 5.5%. This is why consumer sentiment's at an all-time low. And you all can brag about the stock market this, the stock market that, but for most Americans, we just look like, oh yeah, Donald Trump stock trading from the Oval Office, 3,800 trades in Q1, making all this money. They leak a story, the market goes up, it goes down, they sell, they leak another story, it goes up. That ain't helping the American people buy a home. That ain't helping the American people buy groceries or get a job that pays them what they deserve to be paid. That ain't doing any of that. And so that's where we are, America. And then, of course, I did multiple videos on this as well, though. Pam Bondi's deposition is tomorrow, but she's probably not going to do it under oath. She's probably not going to do it under video camera, just like Howard Lutnick. So expect the MAGAs to come out and say, here's what she said. Then the Democrats will say, here's what she said. And then they'll whatever. And then we'll get a transcript 2 weeks down the line. And we won't get to see what Bondi actually looks like, what her facial expressions are. She just announced that she's got thyroid cancer. That was announced leading into this deposition, which, is interesting. I certainly don't wish thyroid cancer upon anybody, even people who I think are not good people like Pam Bondi. So I wish her a recovery and wish anybody who suffers from, but that's what they're announcing. There was no announcements of this before, but that's being announced this week. Okay. You had Donald Trump filing an amended complaint against the Wall Street Journal, saying that the letter in Epstein's 50th birthday was absolutely not mine. And then citing Ghislaine Maxwell's statements to Todd Blanche as evidence to support the amended complaint. So that whole thing with Ghislaine Maxwell, she's being used as evidence by Trump to file an amended complaint. Ghislaine's his character witness. Ghislaine is the president of the United States character witness in an amended complaint where he's saying that this card that's in the Epstein estate book of Jeffrey Epstein, this is an independent source, that we've seen the letter now. We've seen it. You sue the Wall Street Journal for defamation and say, I didn't write it. That's not my signature. Come on, man. Come on, man. And then you use the Department of Justice to criminally investigate E. Jean Carroll for testimony she gave in a case where you were found liable for sexual assault. You were found liable. It was affirmed by the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. You were found liable for sexually assaulting her. And you act like you won because you go, oh, well, the jury didn't find it was my genitals. They found it was my finger. So therefore, I was vindicated by the jury. What? Wow, sickening. That's at the president of the United States essential. In my opinion, that's essentially what his argument boiled down to when he sued George Stephanopoulos, where he was saying it wasn't rape because it wasn't genitals, it was finger. And New York has a technical definition that's different. What would that trial look like? The president of the United States having a deposition taken over that, or sitting in a trial over that? That's why when it comes to the Wall Street Journal, They need to just take the guy's deposition. Enough of this crap. You know, they file their motions to dismiss. Then Donald Trump files an opposition. They delay this thing for years. Just take the guy's deposition. If Trump ever sued me, I would take the guy. I would answer. I wouldn't file a motion to dismiss, even though I know I'd win the motion to dismiss. I would answer, and I would immediately notice his deposition. I would propound a ton of discovery, and I would immediately take his deposition. I would make sure the deposition was public, that the video was open for everybody to see. And then what's he going to do? He's scared. This is going back to what I said before. He's scared. He's going to sit for a deposition. He ain't going to sit for a deposition. I'm too busy. Dad, can't do it. I can't do it. You filed a lawsuit, sit for the deposition. I'd want to personally take that deposition. 7 hours. Let's do it. That's what the Wall Street Journal should do. That's what all these people who he sues should do. Honestly, it's what they should do. Take his deposition. Well, we covered a lot of topics. Make sure you watch the Brother Show tonight, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. So I'll do with Brett and Jordy. Thanks for hanging in this fight together. I know there's a lot going on. I know there's a lot going on, but you're hanging in the fight. We're almost in the midterms. And I don't care what political affiliation you have. This isn't about politics. I just want accountability. I want accountability. I want there to be real hearings, real accountability, and I want the truth. That's what I want. Thanks everybody for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope I see you on the show with the brothers. Become a member of our YouTube channel. Subscribe to our Substack. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one. Shout out Midas Mighty.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.